Would you please make and welcome the Honourable Mr John Howard. Come on. Got to make a presentation. Gunny, would you like to make the presentation to Mr Howard?
How are you? Very well, sir. How are you? See you again.
Great to see you indeed.
Thank you.
Please come. Does that bring back some nice memories, Mr Howard?
Yes, you were gracious to play the batting.
I insisted on the batting because not many people have seen the batting.
I've often been asked what was the greatest mistake I made as Prime Minister, and I said allowing the Pakistani army to talk me into bowling.
Gunny, can you make the presentation and show us what's in there?
For sure. Thanks very much, Bruno. Sir, it's an absolute honour to be up here, it really is. And to recall a little bit of what's the history is I must be held a little bit responsible for the bowling incident, as I taped up the ball that may or not have been stuck to Sir's hand. It's an absolute privilege not only to have yourself, sir, come along while we are deployed and in environments where we are trying to do the best we can, especially in that environment. Humanitarian aid, disaster relief. It was a blessing for us to be in a situation where we could have your attendance, which actually inspires us to keep doing the great job that the men and women continue to do. It is with great pleasure, sir, I give you this ball, which was the ball that you are well known for. But I've got to admit, from my possession, I think your batting was outstanding, sir.
Thank you. That's a good holiday. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Can I, first on a very serious note, say there, of all the things I did when I was Prime Minister, none gave me greater inspiration and pride as an Australian than to visit the men and women of the ADF when they were deployed overseas. They were absolutely magnificent. And that particular deployment, which was a medical team, arose out of a telephone conversation between myself and Pervez Musharraf, the then President of Pakistan, and they'd had this terrible earthquake which had devastated parts of Kashmir and devastated that part of Pakistan, great loss of life. And I thought the best thing we could do was provide this medical team, and they were doing an absolutely superb job. And can I say that of all the people that I interacted with when I was Prime Minister, nobody showed a greater fanaticism about cricket as a head of government than Pervez Musharraf. He was the ultimate cricket tragic when it came to political leaders I dealt with. There were plenty of others who led cricket-playing nations, but I mean, Tony Blair, who I got on very well with, he had no interest in cricket, none whatsoever. And I vividly remember such was Musharraf's dedication of the game and to the interest of Australia that after we lost the Ashes in 2005, there was a United Nations meeting in New York, which Tony Blair attended and I attended, and Pervez Musharraf was there, and I felt I had to do the right thing, and I went up to Tony and said, "Congratulations, on winning the Ashes," and he said, "Oh, thanks very much." I think he was aware of it, but I've never forgotten this. Pervez Musharraf came over to me, to both of us, and he knew what was going on, and he said, "John, don't worry, we will avenge you." And true to his word, England went to Pakistan later that year and lost. So he had really done it. But there is a tremendous bond between our two countries, and to Waqar Yunus, it's so great that you come here tonight as a son of Pakistan, but also a proud citizen of Australia, and that's a wonderful thing. And what has, of course, brought those two strands together is our love of cricket, and it's sort of, I suppose, poetic justice in a way that Pakistan should now be led by the great Imran Khan, who regularly appeared in the Test match teams of the century some years ago, because that bond is so tremendously important. But my friends, apart from thanking the RAAF and thanking you for this lovely little gesture, can I say there's something else I want to do tonight, and that is I want to honour somebody that I played against, not cricket, but played against in politics, and that is the late Bob Hawke. Bob Hawke was a genuine lover of cricket. I think it's fair to say that in the post-war period in Australian politics, three Prime Ministers have at least distinguished themselves by their passion for cricket. And one of those was Robert Gordon Menzies, another was Bob Hawke, and the third I humbly think perhaps myself. Now, I've got to say Scott Morrison quite likes cricket, although you hear him talk about those Sharks a little too much, but we'll put that to one side. But Bob was a person who really loved cricket. He was quite good at cricket in his younger days. Bob did many things for cricket, apart from, of course, being a cheerleader for the game when he was Prime Minister. He played in a lot of the matches between politicians and journalists, but he did one other marvellous thing, and that is he resurrected the institution of the Prime Minister's 11. The Prime Minister's 11 as a tradition in Australian politics and cricket was started by Robert Menzies. The very first Prime Minister's 11 was in 1951, which included many of the touring team that was then led by John Goddard, I think, and included the three Ws. That was the very first one, and it continued as a great tradition. But for some extraordinary reason, when Menzies retired, it fell into disuse. And his successors, Holden, Gorton and McMahon and Whitlam and Fraser, none of them thought fit to revive the tradition. But when Bob Hawke became Prime Minister, to his enormous credit, he revived the tradition of the Prime Minister's 11, and of course it's continued ever since, and is now a permanent part of the cricket calendar. And I think Bob understood something that I tried to understand as well, and that is sport is a great national cement in Australia. It's something that does bring us together. And although I grew up in a non-Australian rules playing environment, Sydney of the late 1940s and the 1950s, not much Australian rules then. It was generations before the Sydney Swans. But I remember as Prime Minister going to the great North Melbourne Grand Final breakfast, which is probably the greatest sporting breakfast in Australia. It's an extraordinary event. And you could sense on that occasion just what sport, whether it was Australian rules or cricket or rugby league or rugby union, what it really meant to the Australian people. And Bob Hawke understood that. His two great sporting passions, as I understood it, were horse racing and cricket. Now, I fell a bit short in the horse racing department. Bart Cummings used to periodically lecture me about the need to go to more race meetings, and I think I probably would have disappointed him, but Bob quite liked the track, I think it's fair to say. He enjoyed a bet, and he derived great pleasure from it, and he formed great associations with some of Australia's greatest trainers. But he never lost his deep passion for cricket, and he understood the game, he respected the game, and he identified with it as Australia's great national sport. And I want to acknowledge very warmly and quite unreservedly my respect for his respect for the game, his passion for the game. And I'm delighted that tonight his granddaughter is with us. Sophie, would you like to come forward? We're really very dead. Tell me, did you talk to him much about cricket, or?
Somebody asked me this question earlier. You couldn't really have a relationship with my grandfather and not talk cricket. Look, my grandfather and my family were big people, not necessarily physically in stature, but big in our heart and our passion and our lives and our aspirations, but also in love. And he loved cricket with all of his heart, and he loved the people of cricket, and that's why I think tonight is it's so lovely to be here, because the community paying their respects, and it's just a lovely tribute for the community that he loved. So thank you.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. Yeah. Sophie, as a reminder, through family and as a representative of what Bob represented to the sporting people of Australia, and it was part of his authenticity as an Australian figure, as a very successful Australian Prime Minister. We had the odd differences occasionally, but we sort of don't go into those things on an occasion like this. But really, we are so happy that you're here, and I think I can say on behalf of everybody in this room that Bob Hawke understood the centrality of sport, and within that, the centrality of cricket to the Australian identity, and that's a very important thing.
Thank you.
Sophie, I want to present this to you. It's a photograph of Bob Hawke and the late Sir Donald Bradman, and of course Bob Hawke was Prime Minister of Australia when the Bradman Museum was launched way back in 1989, and I've just written there, a cricket-loving Prime Minister. He certainly was, and the Australian people thank him for his contribution as a great cricket-loving Prime Minister.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Mr. Howard. Thank you, Sophie. Wonderful memento. The ball, I'll have to get it back. I'll have to go back in the Bradman Museum. Maybe. Wacko, congratulations.